In a world where awakeners battle deadly monsters, humanity's strongest hero, Kim Sung-bin, fights to save mankind. Despite his efforts, he fails to prevent destruction. Now he returns 20 years into the past to fight anew. Several voices refer to a child as their hero and ask him to save this world and to save them. He slowly starts crying and tells his mom that people are saying he's a hero, questioning why he needs to be one. He tearfully exclaims that he wants to stop because it's too hard and scary. His mom comfortingly says he is this world's hope, so he should stop sounding so weak and should die like a hero. Kim Sung-bin suddenly wakes up as it's raining and faces the army of monsters, remarking that it doesn't look like they're giving him any time to rest. He says quite a lot of them manage to gather here and jumps forward, effortlessly slashing through them one after another before smashing the ground, creating a huge shockwave. Later, as he's wearily coughing blood, a gigantic being slowly approaches him, remarking that that's a tempting power as expected of a human's hero. He says he's Fafnir and acknowledges that he's worthy of becoming part of him because he will defeat him and make that power his. As Kim is clutching the wound in his chest, he admits this is how it's going to end and says the title hero makes him laugh because in the end, he didn't manage to protect anyone. Fafnir raises his fist and brings it crashing down on Kim, who realizes he was nothing in the end. Everything goes black before Kim suddenly wakes up to a boy remarking that he thought he died since he fainted all of a sudden. Shocked, Kim suddenly sits up and looks up at the calm blue sky, wondering if this is a dream. The boys ask if he's sleep-talking and tell him that it's time for him to get beaten up even more now that he's up. Kim asks if they're really alive, but the guy grabs his collar, telling him to shut his mouth before punching him. Is this the stereotypical bully that learns his lesson after getting beaten up? Kim quickly deflects it and smacks the boy in his face, throwing him away. Yes, he is. Realizing what he did, Kim apologizes and says that was reflexive, but the boys ask him if he's crazy and swear that he'll be dying today. One of the guy, Jang-yuk's lackeys, tells him that the police are coming, so he angrily tells Kim Soo-yeon that he better be at school tomorrow and runs away. Surprised, Kim remarks that his name is Sung-yeon and slowly gets up, wondering what's going on. He spots a phone and picks it up, remarking that the guys should get a better model since this one's pretty old, but he suddenly notices his face on the screen and wonders who this is in shock. In 2042, the world was destroyed after dungeons started to appear around the world. The monsters that poured out of the dungeons that weren't cleared started to invade reality. Thanks to the phenomenon also known as outbreak, the world's peace was trampled upon endlessly. However, on the other hand, people who received power to fight back against the calamity had also appeared. These people were called awakeners, and he was one of them. Even after all the humans had died, Kim remained alone to battle the monsters right up to the end as the final survivor of mankind and the strongest awakener. A man asks Kim what his name is, so he states that it's Kim Soo-yeon, wondering if this is Fafnir's magic before telling himself that he really has come to the past. He thinks about where his original body of Kim Sung-yeon is and what he needs to do to get back to his body, remarking that there are way too many unknown factors right now. The man tells him that his mother will be coming for him in a bit so he can leave with her. He advises Kim to not wander around since the surroundings of the construction site came out because of that. Is this going to be some sort of foreshadowing that hurts the protagonist later? Kim wonders what that means before his mom worryingly examines his face, asking if he's all right. Startled, Kim wonders if she's this boy's mother, and as he's walking with her later, she asks how he forgot their new address, so he lamely says it's because he isn't familiar with it yet. She notices that he's speaking way too formally, so he starts wondering if he should apologize for causing trouble today, but she takes out a handkerchief and starts wiping his smudged face, questioning when the kids who bully him will come to their senses. She tells him to make sure to tell her if they do it again, because she won't let it go next time. She suddenly realizes there isn't anyone at the park today, and Kim notices that it does feel weirdly quiet. His mom asks if he's coming before he suddenly senses something behind them before a wolf pounces on them. Yes it is, and all right, I'll stop with these jokes. Kim manages to stop it from hurting his mom and recognizes it as a werewolf. He suddenly remembers what the policeman was talking about earlier and realizes it's an outbreak. 2022 was the time when the frequency of the outbreaks steadily increased, so it's not impossible that a monster is appearing in the middle of the city. Watching the pair of wolves, Kim remarks that the problem is how he can fight against them and decides to find something he can use as a weapon first, so he grabs an umbrella as his mom alarmingly says the news stated that they were all taken care of. He tells her to not move, inwardly admitting he isn't used to this body yet, but just one of these should be easy. The wolf jumps at Kim, but he quickly attacks it with the umbrella. However, it doesn't go down and tries to attack him again, so he stops it from biting him with the umbrella and wonders if the attack was too shallow. He worryingly says he can't use any power against a mere low-level monster like this, and that they would have been finished in one blow if he had his original body, or if this one was at least an awakener. The second wolf rushes at him, but his mom jumps forward, pushing it away, shocking Kim. Kim wonders why she tried saving him and kicks the wolf away before running to his mom's aid. He hurriedly asks why he did that, emphasizing that it's very dangerous, but she wearily tells him she's fine and says he should escape. Furious, he slowly turns to face the wolves, asking if they got a death wish. Alarmed, the wolves suddenly escape, so he angrily decides to go after them but collapses, cursing his weak body since he can't even chase them. He decides to go home first and picks his mom up, bearing the back pain before starting to wonder where the house is. Later, Kim lays his mom down and remarks that he's lucky the wallet had their home's address, or they could become lost for good. Seeing her sleeping, he wonders why she threw herself in harm's way to keep him safe and why this body is so weak. He angrily questions if he was really reborn in a fragile body that couldn't even hold up against those monsters. Kim decides to calm down first and tells himself he needs to think harder and more objectively before a screen suddenly appears and confirms he's a user. Kim watches a gate slowly opening in shock and realizes that the door to the abyss opening means this body has the talent to become an awakener, so if that's the case, maybe he could start again using Kim Soo-yeon's body my man's doing an any % speedrun of becoming OP. He reminds himself that since it's 2022, the Kim Soo-yeon version of his body would have been a normal person, so he takes that into consideration. He's entering the abyss earlier than his last life. Kim decides to not hesitate since it's come to this and walks through the gate, entering the Tower of Trials, also known as the Abyss. He explains that if you're able to pass through the first floor of this tower, you're recognized as an awakener, and afterwards, through climbing the other floors, you're able to become much stronger. Because of these reasons, most people aim for the top of the tower, but in reality, the Tower of Trials had a system more important than your current floor that was each floor's level, ranging from 1 to 10. As Kim's trial begins, he selects level 10 and explains that in addition to the floor number, this level system also exists in the Abyss, even on the same floor. As you increase the floor's level, stronger enemies appear, and the stronger the enemy you defeat, the bigger the reward you receive, so it's only natural that you need to overcome that much more danger. He suddenly gets teleported to an arena and wonders if he'll be fine since even in the past, his highest was only level 8, but he steels himself and says he'll eventually meet the same fate if everything plays out like his previous life. Selecting his weapon, he declares that he must charge forward. A few hours later, a civilian is being attacked by a pair of werewolves before Kim suddenly appears, remarking that he found it. He kicks the wolf away and chops it into bits with the umbrella, reminding it that it said it wouldn't let him go alive. A newscaster announces that the frequency of dungeon formations has risen recently. Compared to when dungeons first appeared, it is estimated that dungeon appearances have tripled in frequency. And although the dungeons and the Tower of Trials are similar, they differ in structure, which is why they will attempt to figure out that difference with the information they know so far. Dungeons, Tower of Trials, and the system, the world was focused on these unidentifiable things that appeared all at once. Interest and yearning for these things grew by the day. Rewards from the dungeons not only had an effect on daily life, but also contained far-reaching impacts on the real world's economic system. Awakeners were gradually drawn by the physical rewards that came from clearing the dungeons, as well as the glory and sense of achievement that naturally followed. However, people didn't know that the outbreaks were the phenomenon of stronger and higher amounts of monsters being summoned to the real world as the dungeon expanded would accelerate in the latter half of the year 2028, and they would soon become a calamity that would end the world. Awakeners discussed the updated rankings and how there was a new name they'd never seen before, wondering how he cleared the first floor with a score of 2230 points. Kim steps out of the gate and remarks that it's been a real long time since he was here, explaining that the Tower of Trials, commonly called the Abyss, is a massive world composed of countless floors where awakeners from across the globe gather. Each floor is its own world with a different environment, climate, and even culture. But if you were to point out one common factor, it would be that in order to advance to the next floor, you had to pass a trial. The current second floor is the place of residence for people who have just awakened, and although it is easier to obtain various items of convenience here than the other floors, in order to enjoy that convenience, you have to come with plenty of achievement points from the first floor. A while ago, after taking down a large monster, Kim warily remarks that he wouldn't have been able to push through if he didn't have the memories from his past life, but his senses from before are returning the more he fights. He says he can definitely do this if it goes on, and swiftly finishes the trial, ranking first. He says the rewards are huge even for level 10, and notices that his stat increase is also faster than the past, wondering if the achievement points he currently has are enough for him to go to the next floor. Presently, Kim decides to go shopping and heads into a magic shop where a dark elf, Veli, says he can tell her whatever he likes, proposing to even recommend something if he isn't looking for anything specific. He remembers her from before and says her method of seducing customers to lure them into impulse buying is still present. He says he needs the leap and the transformation skill. Surprised, she asks if he can afford it, so he instantly pays up the 1150 points required and takes the skills. Shocked, she asks him what trick he played and if he's actually from the second floor, since no one has earned over 1,000 points from the first floor so far, but he just says he's a normal customer who came up. A while later, he opens his dimensional pouch and takes out his 2 skills along with a magic power catalyst, explaining that it can increase one's magic power by a certain degree even if you don't visit the tower or the dungeons. Most people just get enticed by the higher floors and don't pay much heed to the lower levels, but there are still some hidden gems. Kim realizes how useful it is to have the memories of his past life before a boy approaches him. Kim turns around to see who it is and recognizes the guy as Choi Hakjin in shock. Choi Hakjin is a genius awakener who used to be praised by the Abyss, but in a not-so-distant future, he became the main culprit behind the annihilation of a major guild. Choi asks if there's something on his face, so Kim hurriedly apologizes and asks if there's anything he needs. Choi admits he's been following him since he exited the shop, remarking that he seems to have an eye for good equipment, so he wants them to form a party together. In level 10 of the second floor, Kim receives the Sharl tribe's treasure, remarking that they're hunters who specialize in tracking, so trying to escape from these guys is a bit difficult. He wonders what the treasure is, noting that it doesn't seem to have anything special about it. He suddenly realizes something and reveals himself to the Sharl tribe before slashing through one of them, explaining that surviving in the forest means he's allowed to kill every enemy here. Using the jump ability, he quickly cuts through the beasts, explaining that they're a tribe that likes to move in large groups, which means there's a possibility that this is going to take longer than expected. Forming a party would be helpful, but from level 5, the difficulty becomes higher, so finding people becomes harder. He remembers how Choi said he specifically wants to challenge level 8 and remarks that level 8 is too low to achieve his goals. The boss of the floor suddenly appears, so he jumps up, declaring that he's going to turn the food chain upside down before slashing through it. Later, it's shown that the Sharl tribe's treasure can recover the holder from all damage and status ailments, seeing which Kim remarks that he's glad he stayed and fought since his stats are going up faster, and transformation allows him to obtain the boss traits like Berserker, with which his physical abilities improve based on his exhaustion, health, and how much he's bleeding. Later, Kim comes home to a delicious meal waiting for him and asks his mom what this is, so she apologizes, since this is all she can do. He sits down and slowly takes a bite, inwardly thanking her and vowing to protect her even if he may not be able to become her real son. News of Kim passing the second floor with 2,200 points gets out, and after seeing people online discussing him, he worryingly realizes this is going to get annoying. At the office of the Aries Guild in Gangnam Seoul, a guy tells Choi that Kim seems to have become an awakener around the same time as him and asks if he knows anything, but Choi says he hasn't ran into him at all, so the guy admits the tower is a big place and asks how the third floor is going, telling him that he can't delay it for too long even if he's fighting level 8 monsters, which is higher than what others do, especially now since Kim Suyeon has appeared. Choi says he's trying to find someone to raid the third floor with, but has been pretty unsuccessful so far since he wants to challenge level 8 specifically. He adds that he'll go alone if he can't find anyone, so the man says he'll find someone and tells him to not focus on anything other than climbing the tower. He tells him to report back to him in a week and beat Kim if he can. As Choi's walking back, he wonders if the boy he met was Kim, but just decides to worry about himself for now. A year later, Kim tells his mom that he'll be traveling deep into rural areas, which she agrees to since he's studied hard, and says goodbye to him. Kim says he was worried since he had the CSAT in the middle, but he's glad he still managed to clear the 9th floor. Since he isn't sure about how long the 10th floor is going to take, he decides to travel as an excuse for stepping away. The 10th floor is an important trial that Awakeners need to surpass because the difficulty of the trials jumps up every 10th floor to the point that some say the 11th and 12th floors are easier than it. Because of that, everyone usually challenges a level that is 1 or 2 lower than what they usually go for, but the moment you do that, the subsequent floors start becoming harder, which is why he needs to become stronger to stop that from happening. Knowing the terrible events that are about to occur, he vows to change the future and protect it for sure this time. At the entrance to the 10th floor, a man asks Kim for some spare change, so Kim donates 5,000 points. Damn, that boy's generous, knowing he actually has a very important role. He asks the gatekeeper for information on level 10, startling the man who tells him to be careful of the chief. Kim remarks that the information of the gatekeeper is never wrong even if it's a bit vague, and steps forward, deciding to choose level 10. A girl picks out a few berries and happily says she didn't know she'd be able to fill up a whole basket today. He decides to eat one now, but a large beast suddenly approaches her, so he desperately tries fleeing and is about to get eaten before Kim grabs him and jumps up before slashing through the beast. He asks him if he's alright and later tries to tell her mom that he's just an outsider who saved a kid while passing by, but the woman says she knows he has other intentions, telling him that he wouldn't have benefited even if he tried to hold her hostage, since there's nothing to take from the village, so he should hurry and leave. Startled, Kim says there's been a misunderstanding and wonders why they're acting like this when he didn't do anything. A screen appears, telling him to save this village from its crisis, and after seeing the dreary mood of the civilians, Kim admits this is definitely different from the other floors, wondering where he'll be able to gather some information from. Sensing the people watching him, he explains that the people in the trials are called NPCs, but their appearance and mindset are scarily similar to real humans, which is why it doesn't just feel like it's part of the programming. Their extreme dislike for strangers and the mood around the village is very similar to the look of a world nearing its destruction. Later, he wearily remarks that he needs to find an informant to proceed, but he can't even get an ant. The boy from before cautiously calls for him and drops some berries into his hand before hiding behind a tree, thanking him for what he did. He asks if he can come back here and takes out his pouch to show him the amount of food he has. As the boy's eating, he explains that there isn't much food in the village, which is why everyone is so unfriendly in case their food gets stolen. He admits that they must be having a hard time, but the boy says everyone is holding out so far thanks to the village chief, who's the hero of their village since he's been protecting them for all his life. He asks Kitten why he came here, so he says he was wondering if there's any way he can help the chief, like giving him the food that he has or dealing with any monsters around the village. The boy reveals that those monsters can't come into the village because the chief made it that way. Shocked, he's about to ask for more detail, but a voice suddenly asks if he's the outsider who came to the village as a smiling man approaches them and introduces himself as the chief of this village. Kim keeps the gatekeeper's advice in his mind as the chief says food in this village is scarce, so giving it out like this is extremely reckless. The chief says he hopes Kim will abstain from rationing without permission, so Kim says he was planning to meet him anyways and introduces himself as just an outsider passing by who saw the town and decided to stay here for a few nights, asking if he can get permission to do so. The chief says the villagers are wary of the outsiders, and Kim remarks that he isn't letting his guard down before the chief asks the boy if he hasn't told him not to eat food without permission. He worryingly starts apologizing, but Kim tells him to not worry and tells the chief that it won't affect the village in any way because he has enough to share with everyone. The chief's assistant sees the food inside his pouch in shock before Kim tells him that he'll provide as much food as they need if they can get him a place to sleep. The chief tells him to follow them, agreeing to give him the remaining empty house. Later, Kim sees a gathering and wonders if it's a religious ceremony, acknowledging that these are hard times, so it's only natural that your heart wants to lean on an absolute being. He remembers that he's seen this multiple times because in a world that was close to dying, people who were filled with despair went insane in all sorts of different ways, those who hid behind the name of religion while facing doom, those who committed atrocious acts and abandoned everything after seeing the reality in front of their eyes, but of course, even like this, in the end, no one was left. He says this is pretty tame since at least there aren't any who try to harm others, but Kim suddenly sees a man getting executed and wonders if the selfishness of man can never change as the civilians agree that it had to be done to protect the village. They dedicate it all to the chief since if it wasn't for him, their village would have already fallen to ruin. They remember that they need to make a sacrifice in 3 days and wonder what they'll do if it's their turn then. The chief's assistant reports that the ceremony was completed today, but they come have a sacrifice for the one in 3 days, so the chief asks what the movement of the outsider is looking like, to which the man says he isn't doing anything out of the ordinary and says he knew he'd only accepted him to make him a sacrifice. The chief says he was sent here by their god to be sacrificed and orders his assistant to use a sleeping potion to make him sleep before throwing him to the thing underground on the day of the ceremony. As time goes by, the situation of the village is becoming more critical. Thus, a small sacrifice for protection of the majority is unavoidable. One day, a man-eating snake appeared and built its nest under the village. Coincidentally, its territory markings stopped other monsters from approaching, and the village became safe from monster attacks thanks to that. It had already been consumed by the fear of monsters from around the village attacking at any moment. As the chief of the village, he had to sacrifice some villagers, but he does not feel guilty about them because this is what he had to do as the hero. 3 days later, the villagers carried Kim to the execution site, and the chief says this is all for the sake of the village before dropping him into the pit. Later, the chief visits the snake's nest, remarking that it's been a day since they threw him in, so it should be time for the snake to mark its territory again. He decides to mark its territory a bit further north this time, but suddenly stops in shock upon seeing Kim standing near the snake's decapitated head, remarking that he didn't expect to see the chief all the way here. Bamboozled, the chief wonders how this could happen, so Kim says he makes it sound like it shouldn't have died. The chief exclaims that it was all for the sake of the village. If the snake didn't mark its territory, the other monsters near them would attack their village. Kim asks if it wasn't for his own sake and explains that this monster is called the gluttonous snake. It spends its time sleeping when it isn't eating and is a truly wasteful and lazy species. After making its nest, it doesn't leave that place and marks it as its territory so the weaker monsters wouldn't dare to come near it. But at the same time, for its children to grow, it needs to keep feeding them. And it doesn't see the one who gives it food as food, so the chief was aware of this and kept feeding it the villagers while pretending to be a hero. However, the hypocrisy of his has ended now as well. He shows the snake's head to the villagers, shocking them. The villagers start cursing the chief for the loved ones they lost and wonder how he could do such a horrible thing. A man says what he did was horrible, but the other monsters are going to attack them now that the snake is dead, so Kim offers to help them since he has something to show them all. He takes out the snake's eggs and tells them to hear him out, explaining that they will use the snake's characteristic to nurture its babies by feeding them monsters. Shocked, the villagers ask who'll catch the monsters, so Kim offers to help them at the start, but reminds them that they'll have to take care of it soon since he's just an outsider. We'll have to leave at the end of the day, your unemployed friend, when you ask him to work. The man asks if he's telling farmers to use farming tools to hunt down monsters, so Kim reminds them that this is their village, so they can either protect it or give up and go back to sacrificing the villagers. Kim remarks that they have no intention of protecting themselves and want to lean on someone for support, and says these are the types of hearts that create a weak hero. He wonders if they're hopeless and if he expected too much, but the boy from before says he'll do it since he wants to become strong like him and protect the village. Seeing him, the man also volunteers, telling the others that this is better than dying a dog's death after doing nothing, which encourages the other villagers to agree as well. The chief's assistant asks Kim to teach them how they can fight, while the chief enters a cave and awakens a monster, declaring that he'll destroy everything. The villagers discover that if they lock the monster's babies in the basement and give them food on rotation, there's no way they'd be eaten by them. They agree that Kim's really amazing as he slashes through a gigantic centipede before the villagers tell him to not push himself, so he agrees and notes that the completion level of the floor is still at 90%, wondering why it hasn't gone up. He decides to move on after completing it, but suddenly senses a tremor as a bird rushes out from the ground. Kim recognizes it as the holy bird of fire, the natural enemy of the gluttonous snake, as the chief maddeningly says it was worth keeping it sedated with the sleeping poison, and says the villagers will treat him like a hero again since he's a chief who can control monsters. When the bird notices him, he tells it to treat him as its master, but it completely incinerates him, seeing which Kim realizes the amount of destructive power it holds and sees that it's heading towards the village. He chases after it and jumps up to attack, but he isn't able to reach it, and the bird attacks him with its talons, throwing him down. The villagers are wondering if Kim is still fighting before the bird appears above them and gets ready to incinerate them as well, but Kim throws his dagger, tied to a rope, and ties it around its mouth, declaring that he'll make it reachable if he can't reach it. He tells it to let him borrow his abilities and uses the transformation skill to incinerate it with his own flames. Kim's mom tells someone over the phone that he went on a cross-country trip. As soon as he was done with CSAT, he suddenly matured and felt reliable, and sometimes he feels like a completely different person. Meanwhile, the bird doesn't die, and Kim remarks that he knew there was going to be a limit to a technique mimicked with transformation since it was too low level to properly damage it. Covered in flames, Kim starts falling, but he quickly grabs his dagger and tells himself that he can't die like this because he can still fight. He remembers the Sharl tribe's treasure and uses it on himself before striking down on the bird, furiously telling it to die already. They both crash down and Kim wearily falls unconscious. Later, he suddenly wakes up to the boy's voice, and the villagers ask if he's feeling okay as the boy tearfully exclaims that they all thought he died after getting roasted alive. The villager says the monster died thanks to him, so there shouldn't be any problem since they carve it up as well and can feed it to the snakes. They remark that it was a fire that should have been impossible to survive from, but his condition looks perfectly fine aside from a few bruises he suffered due to the fall. The boy hugs him as Kim successfully clears the 10th floor and remarks that there's no danger remaining, so the villagers can live a peaceful life now. The man says they're truly thankful since he's their savior and won't forget what he's done for them. Later, as Kim's leaving, the boy finds him and asks what he's doing, assuming that Kim's going to go save another village. He tells Kim to do his best and says they won't forget him no matter where he is, before gifting him a pouch of berries and introducing himself as Melly. Kim tells him to stay safe while the guy asks Choi if he's nervous and says there's no way the rising rookie would get nervous over some evaluation, remarking that he's sure to be at least a B rank or even an A since he's already on the 15th floor. He adds that Kim Soo-yeon will probably come for an evaluation soon as well since he recently cleared the 10th floor. Choi realizes the guy, Jung Dong-yeong, is keeping an eye on Soo-yeon and starts feeling sorry for him. Jung reminds Choi that he should bring Kim to their guild whenever he meets him, since if he can do that, they might even be able to set him free because Kim will become his substitute. At the Awakener Certification Agency, Choi remembers how Jung told him to come out immediately after he's done with the rank evaluation, since they prepared for him to climb the abyss as soon as he's finished. If he decides to change his mind, everyone will have a bad time. Entering the building, Choi remarks that he really has nothing before Kim arrives as well and says it's been quite a while since he's gone through a rank evaluation. As a government agency, the Awakener Certification Agency is a place that evaluates many Awakeners' ranks from foreign Awakeners to the ones without affiliation. They manage the majority of Awakeners, but in reality, it could be called the holy site for Awakener management officials. All Awakeners periodically come to the agency since one's rank needs to be determined by the agency to enter dungeons, and you need to enter dungeons to earn money. An official asks Kim to wait as Kim explains that people who had their ranks evaluated gain the privilege to be active as an Awakener. Their superior body, special skills, and growth potential as an Awakener are all recognized when they're evaluated. Due to this, the scouts from guilds who want to make them theirs are all standing around, desperate to make that one prospect come to their side. The officials tells Kim that he'll guide him in when it's his turn before they suddenly hear a guy angrily telling an examiner that his magic is rank 3, which should be enough to satisfy a C rank, but he's still a D rank. The examiner says they can't do anything since the measurement changed, so the guy grabs his collar, telling him that it's his fault and asking why he changed them. Kim wonders why he's throwing a tantrum like that, even if the earnings in a dungeon for an Awakener are based on their individual rank. Choi twists the guy's arm, remarking that there are still people who act like that before noticing that he's wearing an artifact which has the ability to increase one's magic power value for a moment. He adds that it's a rare item you can't find at an exchange and says he doesn't know how someone like him got their hands on it, so it looks like even if his rank is low, he's pretty skilled in some other areas. The guy angrily curses him, so Choi asks if he thinks these people are grading him fairly because they're idiots and tells him to take the test again after taking the bracelet off if he's so pissed about it. The officials take the man out of Choi's hands to escort him to the exit. Bro's entire career ended. Choi wearily says he got a little too excited since he isn't in the mood before Kim suddenly greets him from behind and asks if he remembers him. Later, Choi says people usually take the evaluation a month after working as an Awakener, so Kim says he was just a little busy, inwardly admitting that he didn't want to stand out too much since it could bother his mother in the future. He asks Choi why he didn't take the evaluation even though he's on the 15th floor, so he seriously says he was just a little busy. They're about to introduce themselves to each other, but Choi from the Aries Guild suddenly gets called, so he rushes over. Kim realizes Choi was actually part of the guild before massacring it and wonders why he did that before Choi gets announced as a B rank. When Choi returns, Kim asks him why he doesn't look happy before the announcer calls his name. Alarmed, Choi wonders where he is before Kim starts walking towards the stage and says he'll see him in a bit. Shocked, Choi remembers what Jung said and wonders if he's really Kim Soo-yeon. As he's walking out of the building, Kim worryingly says he's made a mistake. A while ago, the instructor tells Kim to just put a little magic into the measuring instrument, so he complies and unintentionally spreads a wave of magic around the arena, but gets chosen as a C rank. Shocked, Choi believes that could have easily been a rank and confirms that that person really is Kim Soo-yeon. He sits back down and wonders who'd be brave enough to control their magic rank and count, since even if they're geniuses, only Awakeners on the global level can do that. Kim inwardly remarks that he lost control of his magic for a moment there and admits things could have gone bad, wondering if it's because his stats suddenly increased. He admits his stats have been rising rapidly once he cleared the 10th floor, and he's received some good rewards too, like the skill of the Holy Bird, but more than anything, the thing he's most happy with is the store, in which the list of items have been amazing. He admits that the problem is the fact that he bought an egg instead whose origins are unknown, but a certain Awakener who acquired an egg that could hatch became a ranker with the power of the high-ranking holy beast that hatched from the egg. Choi approaches Kim and is about to say something, but the cheater from before suddenly calls him and asks if he knows what he went through to get that C rank. Choi excuses himself from a moment and turns around to face the guy as Kim remarks that he did want to find out what his abilities were, but suddenly, the guy starts convulsing in pain and Jung appears from behind him, asking Choi why he's so late. The guy falls down, so Jung kicks his head away, asking Choi if he made a new friend in such a short time. Startled, Choi says he just met him at the evaluation and was going to invite him to the guild if his rank was alright, but isn't that high. Interested, Jung decides to test the guy himself and introduces himself as the guild master of Aries Guild, while Choi hurriedly signals for Kim to stay quiet and not reveal his name, but Kim just smiles and says his name is Kim Soo-yeon. Jung menacingly smiles, so Choi hurriedly tells Jung it's not him since he's only C rank and he even watched the examination. Jung silences him and says he'll be the one to check before asking Kim if he can have a look at his Awakener identification card. It's not a problem. After confirming that he really is a C rank, Jung apologizes to Kim since he isn't the person they're looking for and remarks that it's just such a common name, explaining that it would be too awkward for him to invite a C rank to their guild, but he can come try out if he's interested. Kim says he isn't interested, making Jung pause in his tracks. He declares that even if he was the Kim Soo-yeon from the rumors, he wouldn't ever enter their guild since he wouldn't know what would happen to him if he joined a guild that doesn't treat people's lives as valuable. Jung says this is just setting an example, asking if he didn't see him having a go at his guild member earlier, so Kim remarks that he was a D rank and questions if this isn't a bit too much to call self-defense. The man starts laughing and says it looks like the way they think is very different, telling him about an unspoken rule which states that no one interferes with a fight between Awakeners and the results of it, even if one person is to die. In addition to that, the probability of the Awakener having to take responsibility decreases the stronger they are, no matter what they do. He declares that people should be desperate to join a guild where the guild master is this strong and a guild that possesses the authority to be exempt even from massacres. Kim agrees that the way they think is different, so Jung starts leaving and tells Choi they should get going, but Kim gives him a note, telling him to contact him if he ever needs help. Later, Kim finds out that Jung Daeong is an A-rank Awakener and was previously a gangster who was known for his fist fights even before he became an Awakener, though he left his past behind him and created the guild after he became an Awakener. It's a given that the use of the Aries Guild wouldn't be completely clean, since he was involved in high-interest loan businesses as well as human trafficking and drug smuggling. No one can get rid of their habits easily, so he's definitely hiding something, which is why he earned a grudge from Choi, but there haven't been any cases that are too eye-catching so far. He wonders what happened between them and decides to figure it out before seeing that it's snowing. He remarks that it'll be the new year soon and suddenly remembers the other reason he had for leaving the tower. He explains that because of the rules that the Awakeners Management Agency put in place for safety, it's compulsory to get an Awakener certification to participate in dungeon conquests in reality, so he had no choice but to take the examination. He was originally going to take his time but couldn't push it back any further because he knew that the incident would happen soon. He wonders if he'll fail even though he meets the application requirements, remarking that he's a C-rank Awakener and has no experience with dungeon conquests either. He remembers his meeting with Choi and Jung and questions if he should try baiting them even though he's not too fond of it. In a cafe, a woman looks at a list of Awakeners and remarks that there isn't anyone amazing here, but there's an okay synergy here, telling her partner that he's being way too harsh, and it's not like the other members are the important since he's here as well, so he should stop being so tense. B-rank Awakener Lee Juho says they need one more Awakener because this just isn't enough. She asks if it's really necessary when an increase in members will lead to less rewards per person, questioning why he's such a coward when he's B-rank. He emphasizes that safety is best and says she's also seen how the fatality rates in dungeons are on the rise. He stopped climbing the tower because he values his life. She says he's being a real chicken and tells him to do whatever he wants since it doesn't look like she has a choice. Juho wonders if there really isn't another person before the woman says they just got a new application from Kim Soo-yeon. The easiest way to discern a dungeon's difficulty is colors. It's a system that uses the colors of the rainbows, with it becoming increasingly difficult as it approaches violet. An orange dungeon is the second easiest difficulty, so a party of C-rank Awakeners should be able to clear it without much difficulty. This orange dungeon is going to be a special case. On 1st January 2024, Soo-yeon meets his party and realizes he's the last one there before Juho introduces himself as the leader of the party for this raid. A guy named Minsa becomes excited after hearing he's Kim Soo-yeon, the guy who ranks first on every floor, but Juho quickly clarifies that he's just a C-rank Awakener with the same name, although he and the girl, Baron, were also shocked at first. Kim inwardly says it's good that he rigged his rank since his life is made easier if everyone misunderstands on their own and don't learn about his skills soon. Man's cheating the system. A girl says she had high hopes after hearing the name, but he's just a greenhorn newbie, asking if he's really going to be of any help. Startled, Kim says she shouldn't say that to a fellow C-rank, pissing her off as she tells him that she's way better than him. Baron says they should get going if they're ready before another girl introduces herself as Kim Yi-won, the party healer to Kim. She tells him to not worry about that since there are always people who like to act as Karens in front of newcomers, so she's sure Yeonmei didn't really have any ill intent towards him. He asks who the guy is who's been standing alone, so she remarks that she isn't sure and no one seems to know him either, but Juho and Barian have checked his ID, so it should be fine. They get ready to head into the dungeon as Kim explains that the reason behind him choosing to come to the orange dungeon is because everyone here will soon die. An entire party died inside a dungeon during a raid on January 1st, but this was given so much media coverage because 8 people entered the dungeon but only 5 had died, which means that the culprit behind this is among them. Upon entering the dungeon, Juho tells them to not worry, but they suddenly see a Cyclops standing behind him and Kim wonders why it's here in shock. As the party gets away from it, Kim remarks that something isn't right if there's a Cyclops in an orange dungeon since Cyclops only show in yellow dungeons and up, which means this is a growth type dungeon. He explains that just like house skills such as transformation can be growth type, there are also growth type dungeons that gradually rise in difficulty. He wonders if the death of the party was because of an unexpected rise in dungeon difficulty, but he decides that there are too many things that can't be explained with that. Juho tells everyone to regroup, but the Cyclops rushes forward and attacks Baron, so he quickly protects her from the blows, seeing which Kim realizes that he really is a B rank. But he's far from being the Cyclops match as it kicks Juho away. The others panic and remark that they should have just left, and as the Cyclops is about to finish off Juho, Kim quickly gets in the way and blocks the attack before dodging out of its way, shocking everyone. Kim asks the others how long they're just going to stand like that and says they can't run away even if they want to. The unknown guy from before explains that there's no exit and the path they came through has been blocked, so Kim adds that from the yellow difficulty and up, dungeons have a separate entrance and exit. Once you come in, you can't leave until you find the exit, which Juho agrees with before the cave suddenly starts shaking and they get surrounded by hordes of monsters. Kim tells them to leave the Cyclops to him since there are 2 main monsters here. He remarks that there are about 30 monsters here, which are around orange level difficulty, so leaving them to the party shouldn't be that big of a problem, though that skill would be able to wipe out this many monsters in a single blow, but this isn't the right time, so we should just focus on the Cyclops right now. It's commonly known that the Cyclops' weak point is its eye, but the eye isn't really referring to the one on its face. Its real weak point is a hidden other eye. He rushes forward and lands on its hand before stabbing the hidden eye present in it, explaining that the reason why the Cyclops holds its club so tightly is partly in order to attack, but also to protect its hidden eye. Once Kim's done with it, he sees that the others are still fighting over there and is about to tell them he's finished before the Cyclops suddenly grabs him and Kim questions how it isn't dead yet in shock. Kim wonders what happened and realizes it wasn't the hand it was using to clutch the club, but the other one. The Cyclops crushes Kim inside its fist, seeing which Juho alarmingly calls for him before Yeonmei worryingly says she told them this place was hopeless and they should have just left earlier, but they realize that its fist is shaking before Kim breaks out of the Cyclops' fist and remarks that that was close and could have been dangerous if he hadn't borrowed its regeneration ability ahead of time. Up to now, he was just able to imitate the appearance of their skills, but now he's able to copy the strength of it as well. He acknowledges that it's a bit more than before and wonders if he should play around a bit more while he's at it. Juho approaches him to ask if he's hurt anywhere, but he jumps upwards and swiftly slashes through monsters, instantly chopping them into pieces before attacking the Cyclops from behind. Juho marvels at his amazing speed and technique, questioning if these are really the skills of a C-rank awakener, before deciding to focus on the monsters he's fighting right now since that isn't important right now. He orders Baryon to hold the front on one side and asks Minsuk and Yi-eun to not forget supporting them, seeing which Kim remarks that they come to their senses and decides to end the game now before abruptly cutting through the Cyclops' body, instantly killing it. A while later, Baryon wearily says they managed to kill them all and admits she thought they were going to die before Yeonmei asks what they should do now since they still have no idea of where the exit is even though they cleared out all the monsters, and if things are going to keep popping up like this, what's going to happen to them is pretty obvious. She asks if they should contact the agency to get rescued, but Juho admits he's never been stuck in a situation like this, so there aren't any guidelines that come to his mind, but they decide to rest first since this place looks safe. He asks Kim if he's feeling alright, and Kim immediately starts wondering if he went too far since he's supposed to be a C rank. He lamely says his body feels like it's throbbing all over, so Juho offers to have Yi-eun treat him and goes to speak with Baryon about what their next move should be. As Yi-eun's healing Kim, she says he fights really well, adding that she can't believe he defeated his Cyclops alone since that's a monster even B-rank awakeners have a hard time with, so he says he just got lucky. She becomes serious and asks if he isn't worried about the people here, explaining that Minsuk is scared to death and doesn't try to fight. Yeonmei is just being rude to everyone, and in the middle of this situation, where they even have someone whose identity is unknown, she saw something about Baryon and Juho online which stated allegations like them not sharing the dungeon rewards fairly and how they make excuses to make it look like the other party members didn't contribute much. She worryingly questions if they won't get fair rewards no matter how they handle the dungeon, since he will be the one who suffers the most from it, but Kim tells her to not worry because he has a good idea after what happened now. Juho approaches Kim and says he wanted to talk to him about something, so Kim agrees to go with him and reveals that he had something to ask him as well. As the party moves forward, Yeon says it doesn't look like there are any monsters here, so Kim explains that they should have killed all the ones that came out of this area earlier, so it'll probably be safe until the next area. Barron sneakily asks Juho if he had a good talk with Kim and asks how the AA plan went, so Juho says that plan is cancelled because it seems like there is something more horrible waiting for them. They reach a gate and Kim inwardly remarks that this is a good time for them to start showing their true intent. They head in and Minsuk asks where they are, so Juho remarks that it seems like the center of a dungeon and wonders if there would be an entrance here. Dunmei says that must be the exit and hurries towards it, but Juho tries to stop her before a screen suddenly appears in front of them, stating that the dungeon system has been turned on and adds that the dungeon trial will begin soon, so Kim inwardly remarks that a dungeon conquest doesn't end just because you've killed the monsters from Yellow Dungeon and up. Just like the conquests from the Tower of Trials, you can only clear the dungeon if you satisfy its specific conditions. It asks them to choose a trial pass method. They can either fight monsters for 30 minutes or open the door on the other side and run from the monsters for 30 minutes. If they do not make the choice in the next 10 minutes, the door for the monsters will open and a forced trial will start at random. Yeon questions if this means that they won't be able to get out of here if they don't choose one of the methods, and Yeonmei says they should just run away since it'll be impossible to fight the monsters head-on. Man, she really is a Karen, isn't she? Minsuk asks if the rewards wouldn't be better for fighting them head-on instead of running away and says they did pretty well in the fight earlier too, so the two start arguing. Barron tries to break them up and says they shouldn't fight so immaturely, while Juho notices Kim smiling and tells Baryon that it was all thanks to Kim that they were able to get all the way here, so it's right to ask what he thinks. Kim says he thinks it's better to fight hearing, which Yeonmei angrily says he's got a big head after killing the Cyclops, so Kim clarifies that rewards are great, but they must have misheard since it gave them the option of fighting the monsters or running away. It seems easier to run away, but if they chose that, the monsters they could never fight head-on would chase them, and they can't be sure of what's behind the door, so it should be better for them to come up with a formation and survive in here. Kim agrees and announces that they'll go with the first option if no one has anything to say, telling them all to get into formation. The gate slowly opens and the monsters instantly rush towards them, so Juho gets ready to fight, but he starts getting strangled by one, wondering how they're so fast before Kim cuts it off and attacks another monster. Time for the overpowered protagonist to show off. As the battle goes on, Kim says it's about time, wondering whether the culprit will show themselves or decide to survive first, before Yeon suddenly points towards the unknown guy being impaled by spikes beyond the door to the exit. Hunmei wonders what's going on and questions who opened the door when they had 5 minutes left to the end of the trial, so Yeon admits she doesn't know since he just ran out. Barron asks Juho if they'll be able to stop the monsters, but he admits that's impossible because the monsters are probably going to be much stronger than the ones they've been facing, and they're low on health and mana since they already went through a round of combat. Barron says there's probably a trap, but Kim says they should just go and says they really don't know anything, reminding them that the system said the summoned monsters will chase them. There wasn't anything telling them to evade traps, but there's one right here, so since the system doesn't lie, it's possible that it only activated the trap for someone who betrayed the selected route. Dunmei agrees that they should act as a group, so they decide to hurry on out since they don't have a lot of time left. Yeon says they should close the door as soon as they leave, but Kim tells them that he'll stay behind but isn't going to stay by himself since there's someone that needs to accompany him for everyone's sake, telling Yeon to come near him before the others shut the door. She falls down and asks Kim why he's doing this since both of them will die if they stay here, so Kim says she should say that after putting the dagger down and asks if she thought he wouldn't know who she was affiliated with. He slashes off part of her shirt, revealing the symbol of the Dump Guild, which is the worst killing group in existence and is going to commit all sorts of atrocities in the future. Right now, it isn't very well known. In a few years, they become a threat to humanity that rivals outbreaks. They're also perpetrators who speed up the end of days, so he needs to weed them out by the roots if he wants to stop the world from ending. Kim asks if she was planning to rank up in the guild by clearing this party and says she came up with a pretty detailed plan. Yeonmei had the most uncooperative nature, but at least she valued her life and tried running away. Minsuk must have been greedy during the raid, but his fighting abilities weren't good enough to defeat the entire party, and the mysterious man entered with his identity hidden, so he was clearly suspicious, so she used that to make him the sacrificial lamb, and she leaked information about Juho and Baryon to him to make him more suspicious about them when the time came, but that's what clued him in. Yeon starts laughing and asks if he's really Kim Soo-yeon from the rumors, but decides then it doesn't really matter since he's going to die anyway. She starts using her stealth skill to escape while he desperately tries fighting the monsters, but Kim asks if that skill can hide the smell of blood on her, and she starts getting attacked by the monsters before Kim faces the oncoming horde and jumps forward, slashing through them one after another, while declaring that none of them are getting past him. As Kim cuts through a horde of monsters, he remarks that they just keep pouring out like there's no end to them as expected, but this is actually better since a stage has been set for him to use that technique effectively as he decides to end things in one go. As the other party members are running, Baron asks Juho if Yeon was the one who killed the guy with the trap and asks him how he knows that, so he admits that he just got the information ahead of time, remembering how in the private meeting he'd asked Juho if he's really a C rank since he talked with Baron, and they were wondering if he really is the Kim Soo-yeon from the rumors, and he wanted to ask him to take the position of the leader of this raid if that is the case, since he's better suited to leading a dangerous situation. Kid reveals that he really is the one from the rumors and says he's honest with him because he's worth trusting, but he will have to refuse his request to become the captain since he's perfect for calmly leading the group in a crisis and isn't afraid to put himself in harm's way for the others and is someone more qualified than him for the position of captain. Kim adds that he hopes Juho will listen to his request and reveals that a murder will happen in this party soon, asking him to take everyone other than him completely away from here while he stays behind to catch the criminal. Presently, as Juho is running, he remarks that it's because Kim is so skilled that he can afford to stay behind and buy time while they escape, but he wonders if Kim will really be able to stop the countless monsters even if he's up to the task. He decides to not worry since he'll end up just being a hindrance, but he stops and says this just won't do before rushing back to help Kim, remarking that he can't keep his promise of taking the others and getting out of here. He busts open the gate but watches in shock as countless monsters are getting incinerated. Startled to see him, Kim asks why he's here, so Juho apologizes, explaining that he couldn't bring himself to leave him behind. Kim tells him that Yeon was taken care of and says he can still be helpful, because this is where it really begins. A skeleton mage slowly appears as Kim explains this is the final boss. Juho asks what that is, wondering how there can be a skeleton boss monster before the skeleton surprisingly says that's a bit harsh and says he would like them to call him by his proper title instead of degrading him to a skeleton, introducing himself as the Priest of Darkness, a lich. Kim tells it to not act almighty when it's actually half-baked, telling Juho that it's not really a lich and is just a creature that managed to partially become a lich since the real thing's magic power and density is on a whole other level. The lich asks Kim if he really thinks it would fall for such a weak provocation, so he starts calling it names, sending it into a fit of rage as it declares that it will tear them apart and use them as monster feed. This lich is the kind of guy who gets ticked off by Twitter. It awakens the corpses of the dead monsters, seeing which Kim remarks that it's still a lich and is able to command the dead, and the reason why the dungeon changed to yellow was probably due to his effect. Juho asks why he had to provoke him, so Kim says he did it on purpose so that it would go for him first. He uses the holy fire to make a circle around them and tells Juho that he isn't at the level where he can fight these monsters and it won't be easy for him to fight them while protecting him. Juho says he understands, so Kim leaves the circle, asking him to attract them to the circle since they won't be able to go past it. Juho asks what he'll do, so Kim says he'll deal with the lich and rushes towards it, but it suddenly disappears and tells him that he's fast, but he can't touch him. Surprised, Kim remarks that liches aren't creatures that are strong in a melee fight since they usually avoid close combat by raising the undead to hide their weak spot. The life crystal on their forehead, the mana source, which is their life source. They need distance to protect their crystal, so they naturally evolve the teleportation skill to fit their needs, but as long as you can keep up with their movements, killing them won't be a problem. Kim rushes towards it but misses again and realizes he used his robe to create a momentary blind spot. He tries attacking it with holy fire, but the lich just laughs and admits this would be able to inflict a critical hit on him, but an attack that can't even touch him is completely useless. Kim admits he still isn't good enough to fight a moving target, while stuck on the roof as the lich says thinking is a bad thing, but he should take a look at his sword first. As it starts rotting, he says his death energy infects everything it touches and slowly eats away at its life, so in about 5 minutes, he'll lose his only weapon. Kim says that won't be happening because he'll end this battle in less than 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Jewel frustratingly says he didn't come here just to get protected, but he's certain that he'd just get in the way and would die in an instant if he tried to help. He starts running and says just standing still and doing nothing doesn't fit his personality before killing a monster.